For 8 years, the boy kept touching his ear, crying in silence while every world-famous doctor swore nothing could be done. His billionaire father spent millions, crossed continents, begged specialists for a miracle. They all shrugged. All said irreversible. But the truth wasn't hiding in a hospital. It was standing quietly in his hallway wearing a maid's uniform. And what she pulled from that child's ear didn't just expose the medical world, it exposed evil. Watch closely. Someone deserves prison for this. Comment justice if you agree. Oliver Hart had enough money to bend the world, but the one thing he needed most refused to move. For 8 long years he watched his son Shaw live in silence so heavy it felt like the world had been padded to keep sound out. Doctors with awards hanging on their walls, specialists who flew in on private jets, experts with fees that could fund entire hospitals. All of them came, all of them examined, all of them left with the same cold conclusion. Irreversible congenital deafness. Nothing we can do. Those words haunted Oliver like ghosts, whispering failure in the dark. Every time he tucked Shaw into bed, every time he saw his son touching that small ear with a look of discomfort, the guilt inside him rose like a tide he couldn't fight. His wife Catherine had died giving birth to Shaw, and the silence left in her absence wrapped itself around both father and son like an unwelcome shroud. Their mansion was enormous, 40 acres of wealth, marble floors that echoed under normal circumstances, hallways long enough to lose yourself in, but inside, it felt dead. Oliver didn't allow music. Not because he disliked it, but because the reminder that his son would never hear it twisted his chest like a knife. He didn't allow television, parties, gatherings. Joy in that house felt offensive, as if it mocked the child who would never experience it fully. Staff members walked softly, spoke softly, lived softly. Even laughter had become rare, replaced by quiet nods and avoided eye contact. Silence was the currency of the Hart estate, and everyone had learned the cost of breaking it. Oliver spent most nights in his study staring at the family portrait painted 3 months before Catherine died. Her smile glowed with life, her hands wrapped gently around the tiny shoulders of their toddler son. Back then, he believed life was stable, predictable, that love would be enough. But on the day Catherine took her last breath, everything froze. His world, his future, and his son's ability to hear a single word ever again. The doctors said the complications were sudden, too much bleeding, too little time. But Oliver never forgave himself. Maybe if he'd chosen a different hospital, a different doctor, a different day. Guilt found a home inside him and never left. So when doctors told him Shaw's condition was permanent, Oliver refused to accept it. He spent millions flying across oceans, Johns Hopkins, Zurich, Tokyo, Dubai. He sat in sterile rooms listening to people who held more titles than compassion tell him to move forward and focus on quality of life. "Your son will never hear," they said. "You must learn to accept it." But Oliver's heart rejected those words like poison. The world saw a billionaire obsessed with chasing the impossible. But he wasn't chasing sound. He was chasing redemption, because the thought that his son could live a life trapped in silence, a silence he associated with death, was unbearable. What Oliver didn't know was that the answer wasn't hiding behind medical degrees. It wasn't in operating rooms. It wasn't in the polished offices of specialists who spoke in clinical phrases but never knelt down to see the child behind the chart. The answer was walking toward his mansion wearing a thrift store coat and carrying a bag she prayed wouldn't fall apart before she reached the front door. Victoria Deer arrived on a Thursday morning. The sky was heavy with rain that hadn't fallen yet, the kind of weather that felt like the world was holding its breath. She stood at the gate, gripping her bag with numb fingers, praying the security guard wouldn't look too closely at her worn shoes or her trembling hands. She needed this job, needed it in a way that burned down into her bones. Her grandmother was 3 months behind on nursing home payments. The facility had sent a final notice. If the bill wasn't paid by the end of the month, they would transfer her to a state facility. Victoria knew what that meant. Understaffed, underfunded, underloved. Her grandmother had raised her alone after Victoria's parents died in a car crash when she was 11. That woman had been mother, father, pastor, teacher, protector. Victoria couldn't let her disappear into a place where no one cared whether she lived or died, but Newark jobs didn't pay enough, so here she was, about to walk into a billionaire's mansion to scrub floors she would never afford to walk on normally. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, greeted her at the door with the expression of a woman who had learned long ago that kindness was a luxury she couldn't afford. "You're Victoria?" "Yes, ma'am." "You clean. You stay quiet. You don't talk to the boy unless asked. Mr. Hart values silence." "I understand." "No," Mrs. Patterson said sharply. "I don't think you do. The last maid tried to help the boy. She lasted 6 days." Victoria lowered her eyes. "I'm just here to work." "See that you remember it." The mansion felt colder inside than outside. Too clean. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't feel peaceful. It felt suffocating. As Victoria followed Mrs. Patterson through the main hall, she noticed the staff move like shadows, efficient, silent, invisible. No laughter, no chatter, just the soft rustle of uniforms and the echo of distant footsteps swallowed by expensive carpets. Then she saw him. Shaw. A little boy sitting on the bottom step of a wide marble staircase, aligning toy cars in a near-perfect row. His small fingers moved with slow precision. He didn't look up when they passed. He didn't react at all. But one thing caught Victoria's attention. A tiny, repeated motion. He touched his ear. The right one. A soft, quick touch. Almost a flinch. Then again, and again. Victoria's steps slowed. Something in her chest tightened. She'd seen that exact motion before. Her cousin Marcus. A blockage doctors had missed for years. A simple procedure that changed everything. But she said nothing. Not here, not now. She followed Mrs. Patterson down a hallway lined with paintings of ancestors who looked too wealthy to smile and too miserable to care. "Your room is small, but you won't be in it often," Mrs. Patterson said. "Work begins at 6. Don't be late. Don't wander. Don't get attached." Victoria nodded, but her eyes drifted back toward the staircase where Shaw sat alone, tapping his ear with a look she recognized instantly. Pain. Not loud pain. Quiet pain. The kind that goes unnoticed until it becomes unbearable. She carried that image with her as she unpacked her bag, as she made her bed, as she lay awake that night staring at the ceiling. No degree, no credentials, no authority. Just a maid with nothing except a memory of a cousin who regained his hearing because someone finally looked closely. But tonight, she couldn't shake the whisper in her chest, an intuition that felt less like thought and more like calling. Pay attention, because the world's richest man had missed something, and the woman he hired to mop his floors had just seen it. Victoria woke before dawn, long before the mansion stirred, long before the wealthy world outside lifted its head from silk pillows. She dressed quietly, her heart still heavy from the thoughts that kept her awake most of the night. Thoughts of Shaw touching his ear with that tiny grimace of pain, the one no one else seemed to see or care about. She moved through the mansion like a shadow, careful not to break the oppressive quiet everyone had learned to obey. Her first task was the East Wing corridor, dusting portraits so large they could swallow her reflection. She dusted in silence, but her mind wandered endlessly to the boy who sat alone on staircases and in sunrooms, whose silence was deeper than deafness. After an hour, she heard faint footsteps, soft, light, rhythmic. She turned, and there he was, Shaw, barefoot, wearing small cotton pajamas with rockets on them, dragging a toy plane behind him. He didn't look at her, not directly, but he paused, studying her with the side of his vision. Then he touched his ear again, quick and instinctive, like breathing. The pain flicker flashed across his face just as it had the day before. Victoria's pulse tightened. "Good morning," she whispered, even though she knew he couldn't hear her. Something inside her ached when she said it. He began lining up his plane pieces against the wall, arranging them by size, by shape, by color, everything in perfect order, everything just so. Victoria continued dusting, pretending not to watch him, but she couldn't help noticing the way his shoulders hunched, the way he kept rubbing the right side of his head as if something inside was pressing outward. It wasn't normal. It wasn't random. It wasn't just congenital deafness. Something was wrong. She knew it deep in her bones. A few minutes later, Mrs. Patterson's stiff footsteps echoed down the corridor. Shaw froze instantly, as if the sound, though inaudible to him, was something he felt through the air. The housekeeper appeared with her jaw clenched and her eyes sharp as needles. "Victoria, why are you still here?" she snapped. "The West Wing carpets won't clean themselves." Victoria lowered her gaze. "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Patterson then turned her glare to the little boy. It wasn't unkind, but it was cold in a way that chilled Victoria's spine. "Come along, Master Shaw. Your tutor will arrive shortly." Shaw didn't move. He simply stared at the carpet fibers. Mrs. Patterson sighed and reached for his wrist, but the boy jerked away instinctively. Something flickered across the woman's face: annoyance, frustration, fatigue, but she quickly hid it behind professionalism. "Suit yourself?" she muttered, walking away. Shaw stayed seated, small shoulders trembling slightly as soon as she disappeared. Victoria watched him for a moment, then she knelt on the floor and began straightening the edge of the rug. Not to help him, not to interfere, just to be near. She didn't speak, didn't sign, didn't gesture. She simply existed beside him until his breathing settled. That was the first moment she realized the truth. Sometimes being present is louder than any sound. The day went on. Laundry, windows, silver polishing, then the grand dining room, a space so large her footsteps echoed even in the oppressive quiet. She was wiping fingerprints off a crystal vase when she heard it, a soft shuffle behind her. Shaw stood in the doorway, clutching a folded sheet of paper. He walked up to her and held it out with both hands. Victoria's breath caught. It was the paper bird she had left for him. But now, drawn beneath it, was a second paper bird, larger, wings spread. He had copied her gift and added his own. She looked at him, eyes watering. "Thank you," she whispered. He pointed to himself, then to her, then pressed his palms together. Safe, the sign he used when he felt protected, seen, held. Victoria nodded, throat tight. "You're safe with me," she mouthed. That small exchange, quiet, delicate, was enough to ignite something in her heart, something brave, something dangerous, because caring was against the rules in that house. Loving the boy was forbidden. But how do you not love a child who has lived 8 years alone in silence? Over the next week, Victoria and Shaw developed a secret rhythm. She left little messages for him, simple drawings of birds, stars, airplanes. He responded with notes written in shaky letters, sometimes only 1 or 2 words, but enough to show he understood her completely even without sound. She saw more signs of pain too, more ear-touching, more flinching, sleepless nights, weak appetite, moments when he pressed his small hand against the right side of his head as if trying to hold something still inside. Every day, the dark mass she had glimpsed in his ear haunted her thoughts. That thing didn't belong in a human ear. It didn't belong anywhere. But fear kept her silent. Fear of losing her job. Fear of being seen as unstable. Fear of being accused of doing what her conscience begged her to do, help the boy. Every night she prayed. Every night she asked God for an answer. Should she speak? Should she act? Should she risk everything for a child who wasn't hers? But every night she heard nothing. Just the whisper of her grandmother's voice from years ago. "Baby girl, God doesn't always speak loud. Sometimes he puts the answer in front of you and waits to see if you'll move." On a Saturday morning, the mansion hosted a rare gathering, Oliver meeting with investors from Dubai. Security was tight. Staff moved in a frenzy. Victoria tried to stay invisible. But in the middle of the chaos, she caught sight of Shaw standing behind a column near the foyer. He looked pale, too pale. Sweat glistened on his forehead. His small hand clutched his ear again. Then his face contorted, pain sharp and sudden. He leaned into the wall to steady himself. Victoria froze. That wasn't normal discomfort. That was agony. She stepped toward him instinctively, but Mrs. Patterson appeared out of nowhere like a warning siren. "Back to the kitchen, Victoria. Now." Victoria hesitated, torn. Shaw's eyes met hers, wide and frightened. "Now," Mrs. Patterson repeated. Victoria turned and walked away, but every cell in her body screamed at her to run back. She reached the kitchen door, turned the knob, and stopped. She couldn't ignore this. She couldn't pretend she didn't see it. She couldn't abandon that child to pain just because she wore a uniform that said Maid instead of doctor. So she stepped back, just 2 steps, enough to see him again, enough to see the moment he slid to the floor silently, clutching his ear with both hands as his face twisted with unbearable pain. That was the moment she made her decision. She didn't know yet what she would do. She didn't know how she would do it. She only knew one thing. She would not stand by while that boy drowned in a silence that wasn't natural, wasn't normal, wasn't congenital. Something was in that ear, something no specialist had bothered to look for, something she had seen once in her cousin before doctors admitted their mistake and removed it, something that had stolen 8 years of sound from this child's life, 8 years of laughter, 8 years of music, 8 years of his father's voice. And if she didn't act soon, it would steal more, maybe everything. As she returned to her cleaning duties, one thought repeated in her mind like a heartbeat. If God shows you the truth, you're responsible for what you do with it. That night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling. She heard every tick of the old mantel clock, every whisper of wind against the window panes, every breath in her own chest. She thought of Shaw's drawing. She thought of his trembling hands. She thought of the dark thing in his ear, and she whispered the words that would mark the beginning of the end. "Lord, if you want me to act, give me courage." She had no idea that courage would come sooner than she expected, and when it came, it would cost her everything. If you want part 3, reply, continue. And if you believe justice should always protect the innocent, comment justice for Shaw in your heart, because things are about to get darker before the miracle arrives. Victoria woke with a tightness in her chest that hadn't loosened since the moment she watched Shaw collapse in the foyer. She'd barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, pale, trembling, small hands pressed against that ear like he was trying to hold the world still. That image lived behind her eyelids like a bruise. When she walked into the mansion's main hall that morning, everything looked normal. Staff moving quietly, sunlight spilling across marble floors, flowers arranged neatly in crystal vases, but nothing felt normal. Not to her. She saw everything differently now. The silence felt sharper, the air felt heavier. Every second stretched under the weight of the decision she knew she'd have to make soon. Mrs. Patterson handed her a list of chores without looking up. Kitchen, silverware, then the guest suites. Victoria nodded, taking the clipboard, but her mind wasn't on polished forks or perfectly folded sheets. It drifted toward Shaw's door at the end of the hall. Was he awake yet? Was he hurting? Was anyone checking on him besides the tutor who treated him like an assignment? She wanted to peek in, just a glance, just to see if he was okay. But if she was caught near his room without permission, she'd be fired before she could blink. So she forced herself to walk toward the kitchen, each step feeling like it dragged a piece of her heart behind it. She had just pulled out the polish and cloths when she heard it. A sound she'd never heard in that house before, a muffled crash, then a cry, a real cry, sharp, pained, and loud enough that even she, standing in the kitchen, felt it vibrate her bones. Victoria dropped the silverware. She didn't think. She just ran. Her feet flew through the hallway, past the staircase toward the sound that should have been impossible. A deaf child screaming. The door to the sunroom was half open, and there he was. Shaw on the floor, both hands clamped around his ear again, his body shaking violently, his mouth wide open, releasing soundless screams, yet she could hear the agony in them even without volume. Victoria's heart broke open. She rushed to him, kneeling on the cold tile, pulling him gently into her arms. "It's okay, sweetheart. "I'm here," she whispered, even though she knew he couldn't hear the words. But he felt them. He felt something in the way her arms wrapped around him. His small fingers dug into her shirt, clinging to her like she was the only anchor he had left. She pulled back just enough to see his face. Tears streamed down, his lips trembled, his eyes were filled with terror. And then, with shaky hands, he made a sign she had never seen him use before. Not happy, not safe, not scared. He tapped 2 fingers against the center of his palm repeatedly. Pain, intense pain. Victoria cupped his face gently. Her hands moved without hesitation. "Can I look again?" Shaw nodded, though fear still trembled through him. Slowly, carefully, she tilted his head toward the sunlight. Her stomach tightened instantly. The dark mass inside his ear looked larger than before, swelling outward like something alive, something pushing. This wasn't normal wax. This wasn't a benign blockage. This was something that had been growing, pressing, strangling the sound inside his head. Her heart pounded violently. How had doctors ignored this? How had thousands of dollars of scans and equipment missed something visible to the naked eye? No degree, no medical training. But she knew what she was seeing. She knew what it meant, and she knew there wasn't much time left. She reached out and touched his hand gently. "We need help," she whispered. Real help. But as she stood to pick him up, a voice behind her sliced through the moment like a knife. "What do you think you're doing?" "Mrs. Patterson." Her arms were crossed, her face sharp with anger. "I told you not to interfere with the boy." Victoria stood protectively in front of Shaw. "He's in pain," she said. "Something is wrong. He needs medical attention." Mrs. Patterson's expression didn't soften, not even an inch. "He has specialists for that, tutors, doctors, people far more qualified than you." Shaw tugged on Victoria's shirt, eyes full of panic, shaking his head violently. He didn't want the doctors. He feared them. He remembered the needles, the machines, the endless examinations that did nothing but hurt. "Ma'am, please," Victoria said, swallowing the rising panic in her throat. "Just look at him. Look at the pain he's in." But Mrs. Patterson didn't look at the boy. She looked only at Victoria. "If you don't step away from him," she said slowly, "you will be terminated immediately." The words dropped like stones. Shaw reached for Victoria, tears streaming as he clung to her leg. It shattered her heart. She knelt beside him again. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. "I promise." Mrs. Patterson stiffened. "Victoria, this is your final warning." But before she could finish, a voice echoed from the hallway. Deep, sharp, tired. "What's going on here?" Oliver Hart. He stood near the doorway, dark circles under his eyes, paperwork still in his hand. His presence sucked the oxygen from the room instantly. Mrs. Patterson straightened. "Sir, I found the maid interfering with Master Shaw again. I told her to leave him alone." Oliver's gaze dropped to Shaw, who was still clinging to Victoria's shirt. Emotion flickered across his face. Concern, confusion, exhaustion. "What happened?" he asked. Mrs. Patterson inhaled sharply. "She grabbed him, sir. He screamed. I believe she frightened him." Victoria stepped in front of Shaw protectively. "That's not true." "He was already in pain when I found him." Oliver frowned, walking closer. "Pain?" "Yes, sir. Something is wrong with his ear. He's been touching it repeatedly, wincing, crying silently. I've seen it for days. Today, he collapsed." Shaw tightened his grip on her shirt. Oliver knelt slowly, his movements uncertain. He touched his son's shoulder gently. "Shaw?" The boy didn't look at him. He pressed his forehead against Victoria's arm instead. Something inside Oliver broke visibly at that. Mrs. Patterson cleared her throat. "Sir, may I remind you that she is not qualified—" "Enough," Oliver said quietly. Mrs. Patterson froze. Oliver looked at Victoria again. "You think there's something in his ear?" Victoria hesitated only a moment. "Yes, sir. Something dark. Something that shouldn't be there. Something no one seems to have noticed." Oliver inhaled deeply, the air catching in his chest. "Doctors have run everything," he said. "Scans, exams, specialists." Victoria nodded. "I know, but they missed something. I saw it." Silence stretched, heavy, tense, dangerous. Then Oliver stood. "Mrs. Patterson, take Shaw to the car," he said. "I'm taking him to the hospital." Shaw shook his head violently, panic exploding across his small face. His hands flew in frantic signs. No doctors, no needles, no pain. Oliver's heart twisted visibly. "Shaw, please," he whispered. But the boy only clung tighter to Victoria. Mrs. Patterson reached for him. He screamed again, silently, but the anguish in his eyes was deafening. Victoria's heart cracked open. She stepped forward. "Let me go with him," she said. "He trusts me. He'll stay calm if I'm there." Patterson recoiled. "Absolutely not." But Oliver was watching his son, watching his fear, watching the way he held on to the only person who had seen him these past weeks. "Fine," Oliver said. "She comes." Mrs. Patterson's mouth fell open. "Sir, that's final." Shaw relaxed instantly, relief washing over him like a wave. Victoria picked him up carefully, holding him close. Oliver watched her as she carried his only child down the hall. There was something in his eyes, something like uncertainty, something like hope, something like fear. But he followed them. He didn't know it yet, but his entire world was about to shatter. Not because of what was happening to his son, but because of what had been done to him. As they walked out the front door, Victoria whispered to Shaw softly, "You're not alone. I've got you." And for the first time in 8 years, the boy who had lived in silence felt safe in someone's arms. If you want part 4, reply "continue." And if you're still watching this story unfold, comment "justice" for Shaw, because the truth they're about to uncover will make your blood boil. The ride to the hospital felt like an eternity trapped inside a moving whisper. Oliver sat rigid in the back seat beside Victoria, his eyes fixed on Shaw with a mixture of confusion, fear, and something deeper, a sinking realization that maybe, just maybe, the world-class experts he trusted had not been the experts he needed. Shaw clung to Victoria the entire drive, burying his face in her shoulder whenever the car jerked or the lights outside shifted too quickly. He signed small gestures against her arm, scared, confused, pain. Each sign pierced her chest like a blade dipped in guilt. Oliver watched silently, his throat tightening every time his son winced. It wasn't lost on him that the boy had not reached for him. Not once. He wanted to believe it was because he'd been distant, distracted by work, broken by grief, but a darker thought crept in like a shadow. What if Shaw didn't trust him? Because the world he built around his son had only ever given him pain. The hospital loomed ahead, tall and bright and falsely reassuring. Oliver had been here countless times. He'd walked these halls with hope that dissolved into disappointment. He'd sat in these waiting rooms clutching reports full of medical words that said nothing except irreversible. But today was different. Today there was a possibility, an awful, hopeful, terrifying possibility, that all these years, the truth was right in front of him and every doctor had missed it, or ignored it, or, God forbid, buried it. But he couldn't think about that yet, not until Shaw was out of pain. Nurses rushed forward the moment they stepped inside. "Mr. Hart, we'll take him now." Shaw panicked instantly, shaking his head violently, clutching Victoria as if they were trying to rip him from safety. Victoria held him close and whispered, "I'm right here. I'm not leaving." Oliver swallowed hard. "Let her stay with him," he said. The nurse hesitated. "Sir, that's not standard?" "Standard hasn't helped him for 8 years," Oliver snapped. The nurse backed down. They were escorted into a small examination room with bright lights and sterile air. Shaw trembled in Victoria's lap as the attending physician entered, a tall man with gray hair and a practiced smile that didn't quite touch his eyes. "Mr. Hart," he said, "I understand your son is experiencing ear pain." "He's been in pain for weeks," Victoria said before Oliver could answer. "He's been touching his ear constantly. He collapsed this morning." The doctor raised an eyebrow at her, subtle judgment, subtle dismissal. "And you are?" "She's with us," Oliver said sharply. That ended the question. The doctor approached Shaw with a flashlight. "Let's have a look." Shaw recoiled immediately, clutching Victoria tighter. "He's scared," Victoria said softly. "Go slow." The doctor sighed, adjusting his approach. All right, let's do this gently." He tilted Shaw's head and peered into the right ear. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes flickered, something Victoria caught instantly. Recognition, surprise, and then concealment. His voice remained calm. "Some inflammation, possibly wax buildup, nothing unusual." Victoria's heart hammered. He was lying. She saw it. She recognized it. Her cousin Marcus's doctor wore that same expression when he'd been too proud to admit he missed something obvious. "Look again," she said quietly. The doctor stiffened. "I assure you, I know what I'm seeing." "No," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "You know what you want us to believe." Oliver's head snapped toward her. "Victoria." But she didn't look away. "Sir," she told the doctor, "there's something dark inside his ear. Deep, dense, swollen. I saw it." He frowned. "You're mistaken." "Am I?" she asked. Her hands trembled, but her voice held. "Then explain why he collapses, why he cries, why he touches the same spot every day with pain he can't describe." The doctor opened his mouth to speak, but Oliver stepped forward, his face tense. "Move," he said. "Let me see." "Mr. Hart, with respect, move." Reluctantly, the doctor shifted aside. Oliver leaned down, flashlight in hand, and when he looked into his son's ear, his entire body froze. Because there it was. The truth. Dark. Thick. Wrong. Something no doctor had ever mentioned, ever removed, ever even addressed in 8 years of care. "What is that?" Oliver whispered. The doctor cleared his throat. "It's likely compacted cerumen. Common in congenital—" "Don't lie to me." Oliver's voice cracked with a rawness that silenced the room. Shaw looked up, confused, sensing the shift in the air. "Why didn't anyone mention this on his previous scans?" Oliver demanded. "Why didn't anyone remove it?" The doctor straightened, defensive now. "Because ear blockages don't cause congenital deafness. Removing it wouldn't—" "Would you at least try?" Oliver's shout shook the walls. Shaw flinched. Victoria held him tightly. The doctor regained his composure. "We can schedule a procedure." "Not schedule, do it, now." "Mr. Hart, this hospital follows protocols. We can't simply—" "Protocols," Oliver whispered, stepping closer, "have kept my son in silence for 8 years." The doctor looked uncomfortable. "We'll need consent forms, sedation prep, surgical team availability." "Then get them." "Sir, I'm saying this could take hours." The tension in the room thickened until it felt suffocating. Victoria looked down at Shaw's trembling face and realized something horrifying. He didn't trust these people, these doctors, these walls, this system, and suddenly she understood why. "Oliver," she whispered. He looked at her, broken, desperate. "He's terrified," she said. "If you force him into a procedure with strangers, he'll fight, he'll panic, he'll be traumatized." "What choice do I have?" he whispered. "They left something in his ear for 8 years." His voice trembled on the last words. 8 years of pain, 8 years of silence, 8 years stolen. Victoria swallowed hard. Her heart pounded so loud she could hear it in her throat. "Let me try," she said. The room stopped. Every molecule of air froze at once. Oliver stared at her as if she had spoken another language. "What did you say?" he whispered. "Let me try," she repeated. "I removed a blockage from my cousin when I was younger. It was similar. He hurt again after the procedure. I know what I'm doing. I know I'm not a doctor. I know the risks. But I also know this. Shaw trusts me. And right now, trust matters more than degrees." The doctor scoffed. "This is absurd." "Absurd," Oliver whispered, turning slowly toward him. "Is that none of you caught this? His voice cracked again. But this time it wasn't anger. It was devastation. 8 years stolen. 8 years misdiagnosed. 8 years billed. An ugly word, a true word. The doctor swallowed. "Mr. Hart, I cannot authorize. I didn't ask for your authorization." Oliver turned back to Victoria. "Can you do it safely?" "Yes," she whispered. "I can." "Can you do it now?" Her hands shook. Her heart pounded. She was about to cross a line she would never be able to uncross, but she looked at Shaw. Really looked. And she knew the truth. If she didn't do this, the boy would suffer. "Yes," she said. "Now." Oliver gave a shaky nod. "Then do it," the doctor sputtered. "Sir, this is reckless." "What was reckless," Oliver whispered, "was trusting all of you." He stepped aside. Victoria lifted Shaw gently, whispering silently, signing slowly. "I won't hurt you, I promise. Safe, safe." Shaw nodded, fear trembling in his eyelashes. Victoria reached for a sterile kit on the tray. The doctor made no move to stop her because he knew. Deep down, he knew this moment was never supposed to belong to him. As Victoria prepared the tools with shaking hands, a single thought pierced her chest like lightning. If this works, the world changes forever. If it doesn't, she loses everything. And she whispered one last prayer under her breath. "Lord, guide my hands." Because the next second, the moment she touched the inside of that child's ear, the world as they knew it would begin to unravel. If you want part 5, reply, continue. And if you're still here, comment silently in your mind, "Justice is coming," because the truth waiting ahead will shake the entire story. Victoria's fingers hovered over the instruments for a moment that felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Then she forced herself to move, slowly, deliberately, the way her grandmother had taught her to peel potatoes when she was 5. "Steady hands, baby girl. The blade only slips when your mind does." Her mind could not slip now. Shaw sat on the exam chair, his legs dangling. His small hands gripping the edge so hard his knuckles blanched. His eyes never left her face. Not the doctor, not the bright lights, not his father pacing like a caged animal at the side of the room. Just her, the maid, the outsider, the only one he trusted. She pulled on a pair of sterile gloves, the latex snapping softly around her wrists. She chose the smallest, thinnest instrument available, something more like a fine-hooked probe than forceps, and tested the tension in her grip. Her palms were slick with sweat. She wiped them subtly on the sleeve of her uniform, then stepped forward. "Shaw," she mouthed slowly, exaggerating the shapes of the words. "Look at me." She pointed 2 fingers at her eyes, then at his. He nodded, chest rising and falling in quick, shallow breaths. She signed with one hand as best she could. "If it hurts, squeeze my wrist. I stop." His fingers loosened from the chair edge and reached for her arm, as if he was already claiming the promise. Oliver stood on the other side of the chair, one hand braced on the back, the other pressed over his mouth. He wanted to speak, to protest, to demand that an anesthesiologist be brought in, that a surgical team be assembled. Years of training said this was wrong. Years of failure whispered this might be the only right thing that had ever happened. The doctor lingered near the doorway, arms crossed, jaw clenched, eyes flicking between the girl from Newark and the billionaire whose faith in the system was cracking. He didn't stop it. Maybe he knew he'd already done enough damage. Maybe he knew that in this moment, his authority meant nothing. Victoria tilted Shaw's head toward the exam light, slowly, gently. Her thumb resting just below his ear, her little finger cradling his jaw. "Breathe," she whispered, even though he couldn't hear. "In, out, you're safe." His fingers tightened on her wrist, but he did as she asked. She took a breath with him, as if sinking her courage to his. Then she slipped the instrument into his ear canal. Every muscle in her arm wanted to shake, but she forced them to hold steady, to move millimeter by millimeter. The world narrowed to a tunnel, her hand, his ear, the dark obstruction that had no right to live there. She could feel it, slick and dense, pressed like an unwelcome guest at the end of the narrow passage. She hooked the edge of it gently. For a moment it didn't budge. Panic surged through her. What if it's attached? What if she hurts him? What if they call the police this second? But she crushed the thoughts instantly. "No," she whispered inside her own head. "This is why I'm here." She adjusted the angle, changed the direction of her pull as she remembered the ENT showing her cousin's blockage on a screen years ago, describing how these masses sometimes twisted and lodged. She pulled again, slower this time, with a steady, unwavering pressure. Shaw's grip on her wrist tightened so hard she felt the bones grind, but he didn't jerk his head away. He trusted. Something shifted. She felt it. A slight give, like a cork easing from a bottle. Her heart jumped into her throat. She kept pulling, terrified that a sudden release would make her slip. The mass slid forward a fraction of a millimeter, then another, then another. Those tiny movements felt like earthquakes in her bones. Oliver leaned in, trying to see around the angle of the light, his breath coming in shallow bursts. The doctor took a step forward before catching himself, the urge to intervene warring with the knowledge that he'd had 8 years and done nothing. Finally, with a nauseating, sticky resistance, the obstruction gave way entirely. It emerged all at once, dropping into the small dish she'd placed beneath his ear with a wet, dense thud that made her stomach lurch. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The mass sat there, thick and dark and obscene, like something dredged up from a place no child should ever have to carry inside them. It was far larger than it had any right to be, larger than anything that should have gone unnoticed on scans, checkups, ongoing treatment protocols. 8 years. That had lived inside his ear for 8 years. Victoria stared at it, horror and confirmation crashing together. No one could argue with what they were seeing. No one could pretend this wasn't real. She barely had time to absorb it before Shaw gasped. It wasn't the breath of someone in pain. It was the shocked inhale of someone whose world had just changed in a way his brain couldn't name yet. His eyes went wide. His head jerked slightly, as if some invisible pressure inside his skull had suddenly disappeared, as if someone had cracked a sealed room and let air rush in for the first time. He flinched as the fluorescent lights hummed above. He blinked at the rustle of paper under him. His fingers loosened on her wrist and flew to his ear. His lips moved, but no sound came for a moment. Then, like a dam threatening to break, a single raw, broken, miraculous sound spilled out. Ah! It was small, barely formed, more like a grunt than a word, but it was sound. Real sound. His own sound. The room exploded in silence. Oliver's hands dropped from his mouth. The doctor froze. Victoria forgot to breathe. Shaw's hand trembled as it hovered by his ear, his eyes darting around the room as if seeing it for the first time, even though his eyes had worked fine his whole life. He wasn't seeing differently. He was suddenly aware that the world was not just visual. It was vibrating. It was alive. The clock on the wall ticked, sharp and insistent. He flinched again, turning toward it. He stared at the second hand jerking forward in small, relentless jumps. "Tick!" he rasped, the syllable shredded but unmistakable. He heard it. He heard the clock. Victoria's knees weakened. Tears blurred her vision. "Yes," she breathed, covering her mouth. "Yes, baby. That's the clock." His eyes flooded with tears, but this time they weren't just from pain. They were from the overwhelming flood of sensation his brain was scrambling to organize. The rustle of his own clothes, the distant beeping of a monitor down the hall, the subtle wheeze of the overhead vent. Everything was new. Everything was loud. Too loud. "Shaw," Oliver whispered, voice shaking. He didn't even realize he'd spoken until the boy turned sharply toward him, toward his voice, not his face, his voice. The boy's lips parted. His eyes locked onto his father's mouth, then shifted upward to his eyes. "Dee," he tried, the sound scraping out like someone dragging a rock over rough ground. He swallowed, gathered every ounce of courage in his small chest and tried again. "Da." Oliver's heart hammered so hard he thought it might burst. "It's okay," he choked out. "Take your time." Victoria couldn't move. She couldn't look away. 8 years of silence were coiling, tightening into this one impossible moment. Shaw's throat worked as he forced his lips to shape the word he had seen 1,000 times, but never heard himself say. "Dad." It came out rough and uneven, a toddler's cry from an 8-year-old body, but the meaning hit Oliver like a freight train. His knees buckled. He grabbed the side of the chair to stay upright, but emotion still drove him downward until he was kneeling on the tile in front of his son. He reached up, cupping Shaw's face with shaking hands. "I hear you," Shaw whispered, his voice breaking over the words. "I hear..." He broke off with a gasp as his own voice vibrated in his skull. A sensation he'd never known before. He touched his throat, feeling the rumble under his palm, eyes wide with wonder and fear. "That's you," Victoria whispered, tears streaming freely now. "That's your voice." He looked between them, father, maid, like his brain was trying to decide which miracle to grab first. "Your voice," he repeated, pointing at Oliver. And... He pointed clumsily at the overhead vent as it clicked on with a faint hum. "What's that?" "Air," Oliver croaked. "The AC." He had never heard it either, because he had never listened like this, through his son's brand new world. The doctor finally broke free of his paralysis, stepping forward with wide eyes. This is impossible," he muttered, staring at the dish that held the obstruction. "Congenital deafness doesn't just reverse from..." "Stop!" Oliver said hoarsely. "Just stop talking." The doctor fell silent. Shame crept into the room like smoke. Victoria finally straightened, her legs unsteady, her soul buzzing with something she could only describe as holy fear. She had done it. God had used her willing, shaking hands. Now came the part that terrified her even more. What would it cost? For a long, fragile minute, nothing existed except that tiny circle of light around Shaw's face, his father's broken sobs, and the boy's stunned, trembling breaths as he listened to the world for the first time. If you're still watching this, if your heart is pounding right now, I want you to hold on to this feeling, because the miracle is only half the story. The other half is what happens when people who profited off a child's suffering realize they've been exposed. Maybe you've seen something like this in real life. Someone ignored, dismissed, gaslit by professionals who should have helped. If you have, don't click away. Stay with this family. Because what you're about to see isn't just about healing, it's about justice. And justice doesn't come quietly. The hospital room felt different after the obstruction was removed, like the air itself had shifted. It wasn't just brighter, it was alive, vibrating with sounds that had never mattered before, but now demanded attention. Shaw sat on the exam table, his little chest rising and falling too quickly, overwhelmed by a world that had always been soundless, but suddenly wasn't. He kept turning his head toward every new noise, the rustle of a curtain, a distant announcement over the intercom, the squeak of a nurse's shoe in the hallway. Each sound hit him like a spark. His eyes darted from one corner of the room to another, trying to decode every frequency. "Too much," he whispered, pressing his palms to his ears. His voice cracked, raw, shaky, but real. The very thing he wanted most was now startling him. "It's okay," Victoria murmured, kneeling in front of him. "It's new. It's loud. It won't always feel like this." She signed gently, too, mixing both worlds for him, sound and silence. He loosened his hands a little, watching her fingers instead of the chaos around him. "Safe," she signed, "still safe." Oliver stood behind them, his expression a battlefield of pride and guilt. He couldn't stop looking at his son, really looking. Not the silent shadow he'd raised, not the fragile child he'd spent millions trying to fix, but this new version of him, alive, terrified, miraculous, his son, his voice, his world. Shaw. Oliver whispered, testing the word the same way his son had tested dad. Shaw blinked, startled again by the sound of a voice he'd never heard until minutes ago. He touched his ear, then his father's mouth. "You sound big," he said slowly, unsure if the word was right. Oliver laughed, a rough, broken sound that startled them both. He covered his face with shaking hands. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, son. I should have known. I should have seen. I should have—" "You didn't know," Victoria said softly without standing. Her eyes stayed on Shaw, but her words were for Oliver's wounds. "You trusted the people you thought were helping. You trusted the system." Oliver sank into a chair as if the weight of 8 years finally became too heavy to hold. "And they lied," he said quietly. "They stole his childhood. They stole his first words, his first sounds. His mother would have—" He didn't finish. He couldn't. The air tightened around him, 2 decades of repressed emotion rising like a storm that had been waiting for one crack in the sky. The doctor lingered by the doorway, arms tense at his sides, eyes flicking between the dish containing the obstruction and the billionaire he had quietly profited from for years. Shame flickered across his face, but it didn't soften him. Not yet. Doctors rarely admitted mistakes. Hospitals rarely confessed wrongdoing. But what had happened today wasn't a mistake. It was a buried truth. "Mr. Hart," the doctor began carefully, "we still need to conduct follow-up tests. His hearing levels, the extent of—" "Not from you," Oliver said without looking at him. "Not from anyone in this building." The doctor stiffened. "Sir, that's not advisable. We need to evaluate—" "What you need," Oliver said slowly, standing, "is a lawyer." The doctor's face went pale. "A what?" "A lawyer," Oliver repeated, voice low, "because I'm going to find out who ignored that obstruction on his old scans. And I'm going to find out who profited from keeping my son in silence." The doctor swallowed hard. "Mr. Hart, there must be some misunderstanding." "There was no misunderstanding." Oliver stepped forward, not aggressive, not loud, but terrifying in the way men become when grief turns into purpose. "My son suffered for 8 years, and you let it happen." Victoria watched the shift from the corner of her eye. This was the moment she'd feared, the line where healing ended and justice began, where the truth would surface whether the hospital wanted it to or not. But she didn't flinch, she didn't apologize, she didn't hide, because deep down she knew this was always going to be bigger than her. "Sir," the doctor tried again, "you have to understand, the obstruction likely didn't show clearly on earlier scans." "Liar," Victoria said quietly. The doctor turned sharply toward her. "What?" "Liar," she repeated, her voice still calm. "I saw the scan in his file when the nurse left it open. There was a note, a recommendation for removal. It was ignored." Oliver stared at her. "You saw that?" She nodded. It wasn't complicated. It wasn't crisis-level medical knowledge. It was just one line that could have changed this boy's life years ago. Shaw, sensing rising tension, reached for her hand. She squeezed his gently. The doctor took a step backward, the defensive tone in his voice beginning to crack. "This is inappropriate. You're a maid. You don't have the qualifications to see what you refused to see," she answered. "To care when you didn't?" The doctor's jaw clenched, but he didn't respond. He couldn't. The truth hung between them like smoke. A nurse rushed into the room suddenly. "Sir," she said breathlessly to Oliver, "administration wants to speak with you urgently." Oliver didn't even look at her. "Tell them I'll speak with them when my lawyer arrives." She blinked. "Your lawyer?" "Yes. I have several, actually. They'll be happy to visit." The color drained from her face. She nodded and hurried out. Shaw tugged on Victoria's sleeve. "Why, angry?" he asked, his voice so earnest it broke her heart. She touched his cheek softly. "Because people hurt you. Now they have to answer for it." He didn't fully understand, but he nodded, leaning into her touch. The doctor cleared his throat. "Mr. Hart, If you pursue legal action, this could become very complicated. It could affect your son's future care, his treatment, his treatment? Oliver's voice rose for the first time, sharp and cracking. You mean the treatment that kept him deaf? The treatment that ignored a massive obstruction? The treatment that turned my grief into your paycheck? That treatment? The doctor stepped back again, cornered now, exposed. Sir, please, be reasonable. Reasonable? Oliver echoed, laughing darkly. Do you know what's reasonable? A father wanting his son to hear his voice before he dies. The doctor swallowed hard. Victoria finally rose from the floor. She stood beside Oliver, her small frame radiating a quiet strength that filled the room. You should go, she told the doctor. You've done enough. The doctor hesitated, then left the room without another word. The door clicked behind him. Silence settled, but not the old silence, not the oppressive kind that had lived in the Hart mansion. This silence was different, full, heavy, important. Shaw looked between them, trying to process the emotional earthquake around him. I did wrong? He whispered, afraid. Oliver knelt instantly, taking his face in his hands. No, he said, voice breaking. You did everything right. Everything. You're the bravest person I've ever known. Shaw smiled a tiny, trembling smile. Then he touched the vent again as it hummed, fascinated. That noise is everywhere, he whispered. Oliver laughed through tears. Yeah, welcome to the world, buddy. Victoria watched them, her chest aching with a mix of joy and fear. She had given him sound, but in doing so, she'd stepped across a line no employee should cross. A line that had consequences. The hospital would come for her, the administration would blame her, the doctors would try to spin the story. She was not naive. She knew what powerful people did when threatened. But she'd do it again, 1,000 times. Because when she looked at Shaw, she didn't see a job. She saw purpose, calling, God's assignment. Oliver turned toward her. Victoria, he said softly. She met his eyes. For the first time, he didn't look at her like an employee. He looked at her like someone he owed a debt he could never repay. Thank you, he whispered. She shook her head. I didn't do it for thanks, sir. I did it because he deserved better. Oliver's eyes filled again, but this time with something fierce. You're right, he said. He did. He glanced at the door, the empty hallway, the worried silence outside. And now, he continued, his voice steadying into something dangerous, we find out who stole 8 years from my son. He placed a hand on Shaw's back and another on Victoria's shoulder. We do this together, he said. If you're willing. She didn't hesitate. I'm with you, she said. Whatever comes next? Shaw looked up at them both, confused but trusting, his world finally, beautifully loud. And outside that hospital room, a storm was already gathering, because when the powerful get exposed, they don't stay quiet. They fight, they deny, they destroy. Unless someone stands up and says, not this time. If you're still watching, hold on to that feeling, because justice isn't just coming, it's about to roar. Say continue for part 7. The hospital administrator's shoes could be heard before the man himself appeared, quick, clipped footsteps speeding down the hallway like someone rushing to put out a fire they had hoped would never burn. Victoria heard them through the door, a nervous cadence echoing down sterile walls. She had worked in enough places to recognize that walk. It was the walk of someone afraid of losing control, someone afraid of exposure. Oliver stood by the window, watching traffic move below like ants scattering on pavement. He looked calm at first glance, but his hands told the truth. They were shaking slightly, flexing and clenching as if trying to hold on to rage that kept slipping through his fingers. Shaw sat on the bed, headphones over his ears, listening to music for the first time in his life. Every now and then he'd lift one ear cup, startled by a new sound around him, voices in the hallway, a machine hum, someone coughing 2 rooms over. Each sound made his eyes widen with a mix of wonder and fear, like he was relearning the world from scratch. Victoria stayed beside him, her hand occasionally resting on his back in case everything got too loud. She didn't trust hospitals. She trusted even less the sudden urgency with which the administration wanted to discuss the situation. Discuss. She knew what that word meant. It wasn't about explanation. It was about containment. The door swung open hard enough to rattle the frame. A tall man with perfectly combed silver hair and an expensive watch entered with a strained smile stretching across his face. "Mr. Hart?" he said, a little too brightly. "I rushed over the moment I heard there was an incident." Oliver slow-turned his head. The administrator paled instantly. "Sit," Oliver said, motioning to a chair without raising his voice. That was somehow even worse. The man obeyed. Victoria watched the exchange quietly, instinctively positioning herself between Shaw and the door. She didn't know if they'd try to remove her, silence her, frame her. She didn't care. She'd fight tooth and nail before she let anyone hurt him again. "So," Oliver began, folding his arms, "let's talk about what your doctors missed." The administrator cleared his throat. "Mr. Hart, with respect, I believe there's been some misunderstanding about your son's condition." "Stop." Oliver's voice sliced through the air like a blade. "There is no misunderstanding." He pointed to the dish on the table, the one holding the dark, solid obstruction that had been inside Shaw's ear for 8 years. The administrator stared at it, blinked, swallowed. "That," Oliver continued, "was in his ear. That is why my son couldn't hear. And that," he said, stepping closer, "was noted in a scan 3 years ago. Your doctors ignored it." The administrator's face twitched. I'm not aware of any such documentation." "I am," Oliver replied, "and my attorney will be too." The man's smile strained further, cracking at the edges. "Please, Mr. Hart, before we escalate things, let's have a calm discussion. We value you deeply as a client." Oliver laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "A client," he echoed. "Yes, that's exactly how you saw me. A walking bank account." The administrator held up both hands quickly. "Now, let's not jump to accusations. Medicine is complex. These cases can be extremely nuanced. What your maid did," Victoria stiffened, "was dangerous, reckless, illegal. We need to ensure that—" "My maid," Oliver cut in, "did what your entire staff failed to do for nearly a decade." The administrator froze. Shaw lifted one headphone and listened, confused by the tone in the room. He looked at Victoria. She stroked his hair gently, signing, "It's okay. Grown-ups are talking loudly. But you're safe." Oliver stared down at the administrator with a cold rage that made the man shrink into his seat. "Tell me," Oliver said slowly, "how many times did your specialists examine him?" "Dozens," the administrator murmured. "And how many scans were run?" "Many, sir, but results can be unclear." "The scan wasn't unclear," Oliver snapped. "It was ignored." Sweat began forming on the administrator's forehead. "We don't know that for certain. It could be an oversight." "An oversight," Oliver repeated quietly, shaking his head. "An oversight that cost my son 8 years of his life." The man flinched. He opened his mouth to argue, then hesitated. His eyes drifted to the obstruction again, horror creeping into his expression. "Mr. Hart," he said, voice softening in practiced sympathy, "if we handle this carefully, we can ensure this doesn't impact your son's future care. The last thing we want is for the media—" Oliver slammed his hand on the counter so hard the administrator jumped. "Media?" Oliver thundered. "You think I care about the media? My son was locked in silence while you billed me for treatments he never needed?" Victoria felt the room crack open with tension. Security would show up soon. Administrators never handled things alone for long. The administrator tried to recover his footing. "Sir, we want to make this right." "Then tell me who signed off on that scan," Oliver demanded. "Tell me who ignored it. Tell me who allowed my son to suffer because keeping him in treatment meant more money." The administrator's smile fell entirely. His mask cracked. For a split second, panic replaced professionalism. "Mr. Hart, some decisions are made above my level." Oliver's eyes darkened. "Thank you," he said softly. "That's exactly what I needed to hear." He took out his phone. "I'm calling my lawyers." The administrator's face drained of color. "Please, Mr. Hart, if this becomes public, the hospital's reputation—" "Your reputation?" Oliver said. "My son's childhood is gone." Shaw pulled off his headphones. "Dad?" he said quietly. The room stopped. Every argument dissolved, every threat evaporated. Oliver turned, and tears filled his eyes again. "What is it, buddy?" Shaw pointed at the administrator. "Why, he scared?" The question sliced the air with perfect, brutal innocence. The administrator blinked rapidly. Victoria smiled softly. "Because," she signed to Shaw, speaking aloud too, "he did something wrong. And sometimes, when people do something wrong, they get scared when the truth comes out." Shaw processed that. Slowly, he nodded. "Oh." Oliver walked back to him, crouching beside the bed. "You're hearing everything, aren't you?" Shaw nodded. "It's loud." Oliver kissed the top of his head. "We'll make it better," he whispered. "I promise." The administrator shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Hart, please, let's find a resolution that benefits all parties." Oliver's head snapped toward him. "The only resolution," he said quietly, "is accountability." Victoria couldn't stop the satisfaction that warmed her chest. Justice was coming. Real justice, not the kind whispered behind closed doors, not the kind buried in paperwork, the kind that shook powerful people awake and forced them to face the consequences of what they'd done. Suddenly, the door opened again. 2 security guards stepped inside. The administrator straightened, relief flickering across his face. "Gentlemen, please escort." Oliver turned sharply. "They're not here for her," he said, stepping between Victoria and the guards. "They're here for you." The administrator froze. The guards looked at Oliver, uncertain. "Sir?" one asked. Oliver held out his phone. "I just spoke with the hospital board chairman. He's a personal friend. He asked that administration be removed from the room until formal review." The administrator's jaw dropped. You called?" "Yes," Oliver said calmly. "And now you need to leave." The guards shifted. Slowly, awkwardly, they escorted the stunned administrator out the door. The moment the door closed, the room exhaled. Victoria felt her knees weaken with relief she didn't dare show. Oliver walked to her. "I meant what I said," he told her quietly, his voice raw. "This isn't over. This will never happen to anyone else's child again." Victoria nodded. "I'll stand with you," she said, "whatever comes next." Shaw reached for both of them, small hands grasping their arms. "Family," he whispered. It shattered them, cleanly, completely. Oliver hugged him, voice breaking. "Yes, buddy," he whispered. "Yes, we're family now." Outside the hospital room, the political machinery of medicine was beginning to spin in panic. But inside, for the first time, truth had a voice. And it was loud. If you're still here, comment "Justice for Shaw" in your mind, because this storm is only beginning. Say "Continue" for Part 8. The hospital room finally quieted after the administrator was escorted out, but the quiet wasn't peaceful. It pulsed. It carried the weight of truths too big to stay hidden and consequences too loud to ignore. The fluorescent lights hummed above them, and for the first time ever, Shaw turned his head toward that sound on instinct alone. He studied the ceiling as if it were speaking to him. Every new noise was a discovery, every discovery was a miracle, and every miracle only reminded Oliver how many moments had been stolen. He watched his son's face, with awe and agony braided together in a single expression. Victoria sat beside Shaw, her hand on his back, steadying him as he flicked the headphone on and off one ear. His eyes darted around with each subtle sound. A distant elevator ding, a cart rolling down the hallway, a door shutting somewhere down the corridor. Each one startled him. "It's okay," Victoria whispered, though she knew he couldn't fully understand the words yet. "It's just the world saying hello." He smiled weakly, overwhelmed but curious, resting his small forehead against her shoulder like he needed her presence as an anchor. Oliver ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room like a man caged by his own grief. The adrenaline of confronting the administrator had begun to fade, leaving behind something heavier, something sharper. Realization. "I should have known," he murmured under his breath for the 10th time. "I should have questioned more. I should have—" "Stop," Victoria said gently. He looked at her, startled by the firmness in her usually soft voice. "Sir, you trusted the wrong people. That's not the same thing as failing your son." Oliver opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. Because the truth was too painful to voice, he had believed money could solve anything. He'd believed credentials equaled competence. He had believed in the wrong gods. He watched Victoria stroke Shaw's hair with a tenderness money could never buy. "You saved him," he whispered. "Not me, not the specialists, not the hospitals I wrote blank checks to. You." She shook her head. "I didn't save him. God did. I just listened." Oliver swallowed, eyes stinging. "Then why didn't I listen?" Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. Sharp, polite, practiced. The kind of knock that said, "We are here to manage you." Victoria's stomach tightened. Oliver's expression hardened. Shaw looked up, startled by the sound. "Come in," Oliver said, voice low but firm. The door opened, and a woman in a charcoal gray suit stepped in, followed by another administrator and a hospital legal representative. Her heels tapped the floor rhythmically, her posture crisp, her hair pulled into a smooth bun. Everything about her screamed crisis management. "Mr. Hart," she said with a rehearsed smile, "I'm Karen Elwood, Director of Patient Relations. We want to ensure your family receives the best care possible and that we address any concerns you may have." Her voice was honey-coated. Dangerous. Oliver didn't move. He didn't offer his hand. He didn't return the smile. "My son was kept deaf for 8 years," he said. "My only concern is justice." Karen inhaled lightly through her nose. She had dealt with angry patients before. Angry billionaires, however, were a different species. "We understand there are some discrepancies we need to investigate," she said. "But I want to assure you, Mr. Hart, the hospital's priority is your son's well-being." Victoria could practically hear the script behind her words. She'd worked enough low-paying jobs to recognize the tone of someone skilled in deflection. "Your hospital," Oliver said softly, "allowed my son's condition to be misdiagnosed, repeatedly." Karen kept her smile, but the muscles around her eyes tightened. Medical cases can be extraordinarily complex. Complex? Oliver stepped forward, holding up the dish that contained the obstruction. "This was in my son's ear." Karen blinked. Just once. "That appears to be caramin," she said carefully. "Earwax can often build up in unexpected ways." "Earwax?" Oliver echoed, incredulity cracking his voice. "This is the size of a grape. This didn't build up. This was ignored." Her smile didn't break, but her throat bobbed in a swallow. "We can absolutely review the prior imaging." "Already did," Oliver said. "One of your doctors noted an obstruction 3 years ago, and nothing was done." Karen's mask faltered. She turned slightly toward the legal representative, who shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. "Mr. Hart," she began, "there are protocols for addressing these matters privately." "Private?" Oliver laughed quietly. "No, not this time." He took a step closer. "Do you know what it's like to watch your child live in silence? To watch him try to speak without ever knowing what sound is? To watch him cry without hearing a single tear?" Karen's gaze flicked downward. For the first time, her professional composure wavered. Just a hair. Oliver continued, voice trembling with force. "Do you know what it's like to spend millions on specialists who looked at my son like a paycheck instead of a patient?" Karen inhaled sharply. "Mr. Hart, if we can discuss settlement options..." Victoria's eyes widened. They were already talking money, already preparing hush terms, already trying to bury this. Shaw pulled the headphones off again and whispered, "What? Settle mean?" Victoria touched his cheek. "Grown-up stuff," she signed. "Not important right now." Oliver didn't hide the disgust in his voice. "My son's life is not a settlement." Karen turned to Victoria suddenly, as though shifting strategy. "Miss... dear," she said quietly. Karen nodded. "We understand you assisted in removing the obstruction. However, the legal department has expressed concerns about unlicensed intervention. You may have exposed yourself to liability." Victoria froze. She had expected this moment. The threat, the warning, the attempt to silence her. "Are you threatening her?" Oliver asked, stepping between them. "Not at all," Karen said evenly. "I'm simply informing her of the seriousness of performing medical procedures without credentials." "You mean the seriousness of doing your job for you?" Victoria murmured. Karen's jaw twitched. "Mr. Hart," she continued, ignoring Victoria now, "your son will need follow-up care, speech therapy, ENT evaluations, auditory pathway testing. Our hospital is fully equipped to provide these services, but only if, Oliver pressed. Karen exhaled. "If we resolve this conflict amicably." There it was. The leash, the price, the unspoken threat. Cooperate or your son's care becomes complicated. Oliver stared at her, stunned. Then something inside him hardened into stone. "Get out," he said quietly. Karen blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "Get out." His voice had the tone of a man who built empires and buried competitors without blinking. Karen hesitated, then motioned to her team. They left. The door clicked shut. The silence that followed was suffocating. Victoria sank into a chair, her heart pounding. "They're not just scared," she whispered. "They're planning something." Oliver nodded slowly. "Let them plan. I'm done playing nice." He knelt beside Shaw again, but his voice softened instantly. "Daddy's not mad at you," he said. "Daddy's mad at people who hurt you." Shaw touched his father's face. "You. Loud when mad," he whispered. Oliver laughed through tears. "Yeah, buddy. I guess I am." Victoria watched them with a fierce ache building in her chest. She knew what was coming. Lawsuits, media storms, hospital denials, smear campaigns. They would come after Oliver. They would come after her. Maybe even her grandmother's nursing home if they dug deep enough. But then Shaw reached out and took her hand. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. His tiny fingers wrapped around hers with trust that felt holy, sacred, worth fighting for. "We'll get through this," she whispered. "All of us." Oliver looked at her, something resolute settling into his eyes. "We're taking him home," he said. "Now." "What about the tests?" Victoria asked. "I'll bring specialists to the house," Oliver said. "People I trust, people I choose. No one from this place touches him again." Victoria nodded. It was the right decision. The only decision. Oliver gathered their things. Victoria lifted Shaw gently, resting his head against her shoulder as he hummed softly, experimenting with sound for the first time. As they left the room, nurses watched them with whispered confusion, admiration, fear. Everyone had heard. Hospitals carried rumors like wildfire. And this story was already burning. When they stepped into the hallway, the world outside the room felt colder, brighter, louder, like the beginning of a war. Oliver placed a hand on Victoria's back. "Stay close," he said. "From here on, everything changes." And as the three of them walked out of that hospital, father, son, and the maid who had become the miracle, Victoria knew one thing for certain. The people who stole 8 years from this child were about to face a reckoning louder than anything they'd ever imagined. If you're still here, hold on to this. Justice is coming and it won't whisper. Say continue for part 9. The drive back to the Hart estate felt nothing like the drive to the hospital. Before, the air in the car had been thick with fear, confusion, and the raw urgency of a collapsing situation. Now, though no one said it aloud, The air carried something different. Purpose, sharp, focused, dangerous. Shaw leaned against Victoria in the back seat, his head tucked under her chin as he listened to the hum of the engine. Every few seconds he would lift his head, startled by some small noise, the clicking of the turn signal, the whoosh of cars passing, the subtle rattle of something in the glove compartment. Then he would whisper a word, testing it the way a sculptor tests clay. Car. Wind. Tick. The last one came with a small giggle as he pointed to the dashboard clock. The innocence of it hit Victoria like a wave. How many years had this child been denied simple sounds? How many moments of discovery, not grand, not dramatic, but small, had been stolen from him? Lied away from him? She rested her cheek gently against his hair. Oliver kept glancing at the rearview mirror, as though needing to confirm that his son was still there, still hearing, still breathing in the world he had never known before. His hands gripped the wheel so tightly the skin around his knuckles was bone white. He wasn't thinking about the road. He was thinking about revenge. Not petty revenge. Not emotional revenge, but the kind that corrected history, the kind with consequences, the kind that never let the guilty sleep easy again. When they finally turned into the long private drive that wound through the towering trees surrounding the Hart estate, Victoria exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. Home, she thought. Except it wasn't her home, and she knew the world inside that mansion was about to change forever. As the gates closed behind them, Oliver parked near the main entrance, then hurried out to open the back door. "Come here, buddy," he said softly. Shaw blinked, startled by the sound of his father's voice, then reached for him. Oliver lifted him carefully, holding him close as if afraid the world might steal him away again. Victoria stepped out after them, her legs weak with exhaustion she didn't dare show. She followed Oliver inside. The mansion's silence greeted them like a ghost, but unlike before, the silence wasn't absolute. Shaw could now hear the faint buzzing of the chandelier lights, the soft echo of their footsteps, the subtle creak of the floor beneath Oliver's weight. His face lit up with every new sound. "House talks," he whispered. "Yeah," Oliver breathed, voice cracking. "It does." Mrs. Patterson appeared at the end of the hallway, stiff as ever, her expression stone cold. "Sir," she said sharply, "I was informed the boy was taken to the hospital. Is everything—" She froze when she saw Shaw lift his head at her voice. He had never done that before, never reacted, never acknowledged the sound of another person's presence. "He heard you," Oliver said. Mrs. Patterson's mouth fell open. "Sir, what?" "He can hear now," Oliver continued, because something was removed from his ear that every doctor missed. He let the sentence hang there, accusation and truth woven together like barbed wire. Mrs. Patterson turned to Victoria, her eyes narrowing. "You did something, didn't you?" Her voice was sharp, accusatory. Shaw flinched at her tone and buried his face in Oliver's shoulder. Victoria stepped forward, shielding him slightly. "I helped him," she said simply. Mrs. Patterson scoffed. "Helped? You've endangered your job, your future. This will have consequences." Victoria didn't blink. "I can live with consequences." "Then you're a fool," Mrs. Patterson snapped. Oliver's tone dropped to something cold and commanding. "Mrs. Patterson, you are dismissed." She blinked rapidly, stunned. "Sir? You can't mean—" "Pack your things," Oliver said. "You're done here." She sputtered. "But I've served this family for 15 years." "And for 15 years," Oliver said, stepping closer, "you watched my son suffer and never said a word. You're not loyal, you're obedient. There's a difference." Mrs. Patterson opened her mouth, but the look in Oliver Hart's eyes told her there was nothing left to argue. She walked away stiffly, humiliated. Shaw lifted his head and watched her go, then whispered, "Why she angry?" Victoria touched his cheek gently. "Because some people care about control more than they care about others." Shaw thought about that, then nodded as though storing the lesson. Oliver carried him into the living room and lowered him onto the couch. Shaw sank into the cushions, still overwhelmed by every sound. Victoria sat beside him, exhaustion and relief crashing through her bones. "I need to make calls," Oliver said, pacing now with purpose. "Lawyers, investigators, journalists." Victoria stiffened. "Journalists?" she echoed. Oliver nodded. "People need to know what happened." She swallowed. "Sir, if this becomes public, they'll come after you, they'll come after me." "Let them," he said. "What they did was criminal." Victoria lowered her gaze. "I'm not afraid for myself." Oliver paused. "Then who are you afraid for?" She hesitated. Her grandmother's face flashed in her mind. The nursing home bills, the letters, the threats of transfer to lower-level care. If Victoria became the center of a public scandal involving one of the wealthiest families in America, the hospital's lawyers could come after her life, her reputation, everything she had. They could retaliate quietly, bureaucratically, devastatingly. "My grandmother," she whispered. Oliver exhaled slowly. He walked toward her and knelt in front of her chair. "Victoria," he said gently, "I won't let anyone hurt you or your family. Not now, not ever." She looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. This wasn't gratitude. This wasn't obligation. This was something deeper. Something forged not out of wealth, but out of shared crisis. "I don't need protection," she murmured. "I need this boy to be safe." "He will be," Oliver promised, "because from this moment forward, everything in my life is about making sure what happened to my son never happens again." Victoria nodded, relief softening the tension in her shoulders. "Then we fight," she said. But before Oliver could respond, Shaw whispered something that stopped them both. "Why, they lie?" he asked, voice trembling. Oliver sat beside him and pulled him close. "Because sometimes," he said quietly, "people who are supposed to help don't." "Why?" Shaw pressed, voice small, wounded. Oliver swallowed. "Because they care more about money than they care about people." Shaw frowned deeply. "Money. Make ears broken." The innocence of the question hit him like a punch. He held his son tighter. "Money shouldn't do that," he whispered. "But sometimes, people let it." Shaw processed that for a moment, then touched his father's heart. "You not let again," he whispered, voice shaky but sure. Oliver closed his eyes, overwhelmed. "No," he said, "not ever again." A sudden noise made Shaw jump, the front door opening sharply. Victoria stood immediately, ready to shield him if needed, but it wasn't a threat. It was Oliver's personal security detail. 3 men in dark suits stepped inside, scanning the house like the mansion itself could attack. "Sir," the lead guard said, "we've been informed there may be incoming media inquiries. Paparazzi are already gathering by the main road." Victoria's eyes widened. "Already?" "News spreads fast when the hearts are involved," the guard said. "Should we escort Miss Deere off the property?" Oliver's voice sharpened instantly. "She stays." The guard nodded and stepped aside. "Also," he added, "the chairman of the hospital board has requested a private meeting." Oliver smirked. "Tell him he can request anything he wants. I'm done with secrets." The guard nodded. "Understood." As they left the room, Victoria looked at Oliver. "This is going to be messy." "Good," he said. "Let it be messy. Let the world see it." "Are you sure?" she whispered. "Yes," he said simply, "because justice doesn't whisper." Shaw looked up. "What? Justice?" Victoria knelt beside him, touching his cheek. "Justice means wrong things being made right." Shaw nodded slowly. "I want right." Oliver exhaled, his voice breaking again. "So do I, buddy. So do I." And as the shadows outside lengthened and the first camera flashes began to flicker beyond the gates, the Hart mansion braced itself. A miracle had awakened a little boy, but a reckoning had awakened a father. Say continue for part 10. The first camera flash popped like lightning over the stone wall outside the Hart estate just before dawn, And from that moment, there was no going back. Reporters camped out near the gates, their vans lining the road, satellite dishes pointed at the sky like silver spears. Every news outlet wanted the same thing: a quote, an angle, a glimpse of the billionaire whose maid had done what an entire medical system had failed to do. Inside the mansion, the story looked very different. It wasn't about headlines. It was about a boy sitting on the living room rug with headphones crooked around his neck, turning a small toy airplane between his fingers as he listened to the low murmur of the TV for the first time in his life. The volume was barely above a whisper, but to Shaw it was thunder. Voices, music, a reporter's cadence narrating a breaking story. He looked up at the screen and then at his father, confusion knitting his brow. "They're talking about us." He signed clumsily, his fingers still learning rhythm. Oliver nodded, jaw tight. "Yeah, buddy, they are." Victoria sat on the edge of the couch, hands folded, trying to stay small in a house that had suddenly become very, very loud in the ways that didn't involve sound. Phones ringing, emails pinging, lawyers calling. The world didn't knock politely when it wanted something, it barged in. "We can shut it down," Oliver's lead attorney had told him over the phone earlier. "Negotiate a quiet settlement, NDAs, confidentiality clauses. You never have to see this on the front page again." But Oliver had stared at his son, at the way Shaw flinched and then smiled each time a new sound reached him, and he'd made his choice. "No," he'd said simply. "We're not burying this. They buried my son's hearing for 8 years. I'm not helping them bury the truth." Now, as morning light spilled through the tall windows, the Hart estate staff moved cautiously. Some were afraid of losing their jobs. Some were afraid of the cameras. Some were afraid of the story itself, the implications that the powerful weren't protected after all. One of the junior maids slipped into the room with a mug of tea for Victoria. Her hands shook. "I saw the news, Miss Dyer," she whispered. "They're calling you a miracle worker." Victoria gave a small, weary smile. "I'm a woman who pulled something out of a little boy's ear," she said softly. "The miracle is that anyone finally cared enough to look." The girl nodded quickly and retreated. Victoria wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the heat sink into her bones. Across the room, Oliver muted the television and turned to them. "It's time," he said quietly. "Time for what?" Victoria asked. He took a breath. "To decide what kind of story this is going to be. A scandal that fades in a week, or a line in the sand that changes things for good." Her eyes met his. "You already know which one you want." He nodded once. "I do, but I won't drag you into it without saying this straight. If we go public, fully public, the hospital will come for us. They'll smear me as an unstable father. They'll paint you as reckless, irresponsible. They'll dig into your life, your past, your family. They'll try to make you small." Victoria's grip tightened around the mug. "I've been small my whole life," she said. "It never stopped God from seeing me." He swallowed hard. "And your grandmother?" That was the wound she couldn't hide. "She's in a home that barely has enough staff," Victoria whispered. "If they cut her care, if they retaliate..." She trailed off. The fear was real. The risk was real. But then she looked at Shaw, the way his eyes followed every movement now. The way he perked up when someone laughed down the hallway. The way he leaned into sound like it was sunlight after a lifetime underground. "If we don't tell this story," she said slowly, "how many other kids stay in the dark because their parents don't have your money? How many families never find out a doctor ignored something? How many never get their miracle?" Oliver didn't answer. He didn't need to. The answer hung between them, a silent indictment. Too many. Shaw tugged on Victoria's sleeve. "They... bad?" he asked. "The doctors?" She chose her words carefully. "Some were," she said. "Some forgot that people matter more than profits." Shaw nodded slowly, thinking that through. Then he looked up at his father with a seriousness far older than his 8 years. "You... make them stop?" Oliver's throat tightened. "I'm going to try," he whispered. Not just for you, for other kids too. Shaw considered that. Then, with clumsy little fingers, he signed a word he'd practiced. Justice. It didn't look perfect, but it landed like a stone in a still pond. Justice, he whispered aloud. Something clicked in Oliver's chest like a lock turning. That afternoon, instead of hiding behind lawyers and closed doors, he walked out to the front steps of his mansion and faced the cameras. Reporters shouted questions. Microphones jutted toward him like spears. He held up a hand, not to silence them, but to gather their attention. "My name is Oliver Hart," he began, voice steady, controlled. "For 8 years, I was told that my son's deafness was irreversible. I was told I had to accept it. I spent millions on specialists, tests, treatments. I trusted people with credentials more than I trusted my own eyes. And you know who actually helped my son?" He stepped aside and gestured toward the open doorway. Victoria hovered just inside, heart racing. He looked back at her and nodded, asking without words. She took a breath and stepped out, blinking against the barrage of flashes. "Her," Oliver said. "This is Victoria Deer. She's not a doctor. She's not a surgeon. She's a maid who paid attention. She noticed my son touching his ear in pain. She saw something in there that every specialist missed or ignored. She risked her job, her freedom, and her future to pull out a blockage that had no business being left there." Minutes later, my son heard sound for the first time. The crowd erupted with shouted questions, but Oliver kept going, his voice ringing with something deeper than outrage. "A scan from 3 years ago shows that obstruction. It was documented, noted, and then nothing was done. Why? Because leaving him untreatable meant more visits, more tests, more billable procedures. My boy's silence was profitable." Gasps, murmurs. Some cameras zoomed in on Victoria's face, expecting shame. They didn't find it. Only tired courage and a quiet, unshakable faith. "I'm not here for sympathy," Oliver continued. "I'm here because this isn't just about my son. This is about every family that has ever been dismissed, ignored, or exploited by a system that cares more about income than outcomes. If this can happen to my child, someone with access to the best care money can buy, imagine what happens to families who have nothing." A reporter called out, "Mr. Hart, are you planning legal action?" Oliver didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said. "We are filing a lawsuit against the hospital and any physicians who knowingly ignored evidence that could have restored my son's hearing years ago. And we will not be settling quietly behind closed doors. I want this in the light, all of it." Another reporter shouted, "What about Miss Deer? She performed a procedure without a license. Isn't she at risk legally?" Every camera swung to Victoria. She forced herself not to flinch. Oliver moved closer to her. "If anyone comes after her," he said, "they answer to me." She did what no one else would do. She treated my son like a human being instead of a revenue stream. Someone yelled, "Victoria, do you regret what you did?" She met their gaze, heart pounding. "No," she said firmly. "I'd do it again. The only thing I regret is that it took this long for someone to listen to that child's pain." The questions kept coming, but one camera, one microphone, one viewer on the other side of the screen didn't see a billionaire and his employee. They saw something else. A pattern they recognized. A bill that didn't make sense. A diagnosis that never felt right. A doctor who rushed, who dismissed, who shrugged. And for the first time, some of them asked themselves, what if I have to fight too? Days turned into weeks. The lawsuit was filed. The hospital's PR machine roared to life, calling it an unfortunate miscommunication, a rare oversight, a complex case being unfairly sensationalized. But documents didn't care about spin. Scans didn't lie. Internal emails started to surface. Patterns emerged. Quietly settled complaints from other families, red flag notes ignored in the name of treatment continuity, and financial incentives tied to long-term specialty care. It wasn't just negligence, it was structural, systemic, and ugly. Through it all, Shaw kept learning new sounds. the rustle of trees, the buzz of his father's office printer, Victoria humming softly while she folded laundry. He would repeat words over and over, tasting them, shaping them, owning them. Justice became one of his favorites. One night, as the three of them sat in the living room, the TV muted this time, Oliver cleared his throat. "I've been working on something," he said. "Both of you need to hear it." Victoria glanced up from the book she was reading aloud to Shaw, letting him watch her lips form each word. "What is it?" Oliver took a breath. "A foundation," he said. "I'm starting the Heart Justice Initiative for medical accountability, funding pro bono legal teams and independent medical reviews for families who can't afford to fight the system. Real oversight, real consequences." Victoria's eyes filled. "That's—" She didn't finish. The word huge wasn't big enough. "And," Oliver added, "I want you to help run it." She choked. "Me?" He nodded. "You saw what no one else did. You see people. You hear them, even when the world doesn't. That's what this needs." Her first instinct was to say no. She was a maid from Newark with a grandmother in a state-funded bed and bills that still made her stomach drop. She wasn't educated in law or medicine or management. But then she remembered her grandmother's voice. "The Lord doesn't call the equipped. He equips the called." "What about my job?" she whispered. Oliver smiled faintly. "You're promoted," he said. "From cleaning the floors in my house to helping clean up something much dirtier." She laughed through tears. "That's not how promotions usually work." "Good," he replied, "because nothing about this has been usual." Shaw looked between them. "Vicky, stay?" he asked. She touched his cheek. "As long as you'll have me," she said. He nodded with the solemnity of a king granting permission. "Family," he whispered. That word landed deeper than any title. Weeks later, the lawsuit became national news. Talk shows debated it. Comment sections exploded. Some people insisted this was an isolated tragedy. Others, emboldened by Oliver's defiance, began sharing their own stories of misdiagnosis, neglect, and quiet suffering. Victoria appeared once on camera, sitting beside Oliver, her hands clasped, her voice steady as she told the world, "Don't be afraid to ask a second opinion. Don't be afraid to push back when something doesn't feel right. Your pain is not an inconvenience. Your child is not a number. Don't wait 8 years for someone to notice what's right in front of them." She wasn't polished. She wasn't media trained. She was real, and people listened. In the middle of all of that noise, something quieter and more important was happening. Every night, after the calls and the interviews and the meetings, Oliver would sit with Shaw on the floor and practice words. Clock, window, bird, heart. Sometimes, when Shaw was tired, he'd rest his head on Victoria's lap and just listen to them talk, letting the rhythm of their voices sink into him like music. One evening, as the sun sank behind the trees and painted the living room in gold, Shaw asked a question that made both of them go still. "If Lady didn't help," he said carefully, "I never hear?" Oliver's voice broke as he answered. "I don't know, buddy," he whispered. "Maybe one day, maybe never. But she did help, and that's what matters." Shaw thought about that. Then he looked at Victoria. My miracle," he said. She shook her head, tears falling. "No, baby," she whispered. "You're the miracle. I'm just the hands that wouldn't look away." So here's where you and I come in. If you're still watching, this is your part of the story. Because this isn't just about a billionaire, a maid, and a little boy. This is about every person who has been dismissed, ignored, or told there's nothing we can do when they knew something was wrong. If you believe medical systems should be held accountable, type justice in the comments. If you've ever had to fight to be heard, type "hear me now" so other people know they're not alone. Share this story with someone who needs courage to push back, to ask that second question, to demand that second scan. And if you want more true stories about ordinary people standing up against broken systems, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with this channel. because silence only wins when we let it. Shaw lost 8 years of sound, but he didn't lose his future. And tonight, somewhere in that mansion, a little boy is falling asleep to the soft sound of his father whispering, "I love you," and a maid-turned-miracle worker praying quietly, "Lord, let this not be the last family that finds justice. Let it be the first."